Hi, everybody. This is Ashawn Crawley coming to you again live from my house. Um, as I begin every session, I hope that you all are well. I hope that you and your family are well. And I hope where there is difficulty, um, that there is ease, that there is comfort, that there is peace. Uncertain times. And so we are living the uncertainty with a kind of intensity. And so I hope that even in times of uncertainty that you find some sense of peace, some sense of ease. And I also hope that you find a practice of joy. Um, I talk often about the necessity of practicing joy. My mentor and friend would say something like, the only way to have joy is to practice it. And I believe fully in the practice of joy. You only have it insofar as you give it away. Um, and so I constantly try to practice joy with you all because I think it's important as a resource that sustains us in times of uncertainty, in times of despair, in times of lament. And we are certainly despairing and lamenting and feeling the way the biological fact or the thing called COVID-19 is really affecting our day-to-day interactions, the way that it's affecting our families, the ways that it's affecting our friends. Um, so much loss, so much loss, so much loss. And I said on Facebook yesterday that every time I look at my phone, when there's a text message or a phone call, I kind of get a little bit nervous because each phone call, each text message, especially with the intensity with which the virus is being felt globally and certainly with our families and friends, any kind of interaction, it seems to me, can bring with it the message of tragedy. And so trying to maintain a posture and a practice of joy, not as, not to pretend as if there isn't this despair or trouble happening in the world, but a practice of joy that can allow us to be sustained through the despair and the lamentation, I think is really important. And so thank you. Thank you for joining me again. Thank you for, trying to keep up with the things that we're talking about. I hope that it's been useful to think about the role of the Black scholar, the question of what kind of person do I want to be, the morals and the ethics that guide the kind of principle that you want to live with through the world. I hope that the things that we've been discussing, otherwise possibility, the possibility for alternatives, the practice of imagination, the recognition that another world is not just coming, but another world is already here. And how do we live into that other world with joy and justice? I hope that these conversations have been helpful. They have been helpful for me. They have been a lifeline for me, thinking with you all. It allows me to not despair. It allows me to still practice and feel hope. Um, Mariam Kaba says hope is a discipline. And we listen to Mariam speak with Democracy Now. Hope is a discipline. And so practicing hope in the face of adversity is something that I'm committed to. And you only know that you can practice hope when things look hopeless, when things feel very, very hopeless. And so I hope that you are well. Um, and I am sending you peace and comfort. And I hope you send me some peace and comfort too, um, because I care, right? I care about you. Even if I don't know you, I still care about you. And I think that the way that I want to ground my relations with with other people in the world is through care. And so really thinking about care as the rubric by which we could come to understand who we are as people, who we are, our creaturely existence. And so the thing that I had us watch for today um, is a film which in French I'm going to try to pronounce. Please do not talk about me this badly. But it's Le Petite Vendeuse de Soleil, I think, or The Little Girl Who Sold the Sun. Um, we watched that film. It's by Jabril Diop, filmmaker, and I wanted us to watch it because I think the film is about care. And I'm going to do something that I typically do not do. I'm going to read from the book, The Lonely Letters, because there is a letter in the book that's about this film. And then I'll tell you about how closely related what is written is to what actually happened to me. I had to fictionalize some aspects of it. But I'm going to read this letter and then I'll talk a little bit about why I wanted us to watch this particular film during this particular moment of critical sort of intensity in the current state of the world. And if you have the book, it's in the noise chapter. It's letter N8. Dear Moth, ever heard of the movie Le Petite Vendeuse de Soleil? It's this excellent film I stumbled on while reading through blogs about foreign movies. The blog linked to this review. Quote, Senegalese avant-gardist Jabril Diop Mabeti's Le Petite Vendeuse de Soleil is the second in the trilogy of shorter films called Tales of Ordinary People that was first 1995's Le Franc. The film is an homage by the director to street children. Silly is a little girl between 10 and 13 years old. She lives on the street and moves with crutches. Her legs cannot support her since she has had polio. She tries to get close to the boys who sell newspapers, but they push her and make her fall. She gets irritated and decides to take her destiny into her own hands. Instead of begging, she will sell newspapers like the boys, equal rights for both sexes. Although the world of the newspaper boys is cruel and merciless along with pain, she also finds friendship. The film was shot on the street with the participation of the street children. Le Petite Vendeuse de Soleil was screened as part of the International Forum of New Cinema section of the 49th Berlin Film Festival, 1999. End quote. Funny thing is, quite literally, the day after I'd had my dream about black and white Supermans, about our children and carrying you over thresholds, I found the blog and then read the review for the film. So anyway, I was sold, found the movie at the library and took it to a friend's house so we could watch together. But I wasn't prepared for the film or what it made me feel. The film is about a little girl named Silly living in Dakar, Senegal, with her grandmother. And because money was needed, she decided to sell newspapers, Le Soleil, or The Sun. Her grandmother was blind and, let's say, a highway beggar, kind of like Albertina Walker singing about Bartimaeus in the song Spread the Word. One who needed the support of others, and no, this is not a moral judgment against needing others. I've been trying to think lately about if needing others is the condition that makes us people, actually. If our vulnerability that is common and shared should be something that we celebrate and cultivate in the cause of justice. Of course, this created tension in the film because Silly was 12 years old and was competing with a group of young boys around her age who also sold the same and other periodicals. It wouldn't be that interesting except folded into the story is a notion of carrying as well as giving, which of course reminded me of you. I'd almost say finding out about the film the day after writing to you about carrying you carried some mystical, spiritual quality, content, or substance, and maybe I should just wait for me to carry you. In the film, Silly is paraplegic and uses crutches to get around, which would, to normative eyes, make the selling of Le Soleil most difficult. But she doesn't allow what is deemed by others to be normative inhabitation of the flesh to hinder her desire to assist her grandmother. The boys who were her competitors used her abilities against her. They'd quite literally knock her down and steal her crutches. Intriguingly, her first day on the job, a businessman purchased all 13 from her and gave her more to compensate for her industry thrift and hard work. With the profit she made from the sales, she took the money and purchased an umbrella that would cover her grandmother from the sun, giving the shade necessary for her to sit throughout the day and pray, beg, talk, and socialize. Her fortune was immediately shared with others, not just in a way of giving money to others, which she did, and not just by buying her friends clothes and throwing them a party, which she also did, but also by her giving care as cooling in the heat, practicing protection for and with the one who would so protect her. But all these details don't mean much. It's the final scene that is the most powerful to me. The rival boys knocked Silly on the ground, then stole her crutches and newspapers. Again, her friend who sold newspapers as well, but who helped her and did not consider himself a rival, extended his hand to Silly, lifted her off the ground, placed her on his back, and carried her so they could proceed along the journey. After having placed her on his back, he questioned, "What's next?" Her reply, "We continue." This was, of course, better than the dream I had because it showed me that ones who do so much work to cover and carry others also at various times and places need to be carried and covered. This film was a constant display of a shed, of musicians playing together, filling in spaces through improvisation and creativity, who use skill, care, thoughtfulness, and rigor to create new out of something, to create new out of seeming necessity. Sheds don't have time limits. They are determined by coming together to make music. My previous dream ended rather abruptly with me carrying you and things going fuzzy thereafter. But this film gave me two words: we continue, the gesture of carrying. The point? In my insistence to carry, I did not realize that carrying may well be letting go, or, to sound hella cheesy, holding you in my heart or some shit. Anyway, in my insistence to carry, I did not realize that I too was formed in patriarchy and you too, that we both have to work on a way to be and to be together that undoes systems of inequity that keep us bound, even when that bounding and binding is being unkind to each other or not being fully present to the desires and wishes of each other. Consent as a necessary gate through which we must both enter together, a mutuality of enjoyment and pleasure and struggle. They, Silly and her friend, continued because they were together through it all. If my dream indicates anything, it is for non coercive desire, but it is also for friendship. So it will be what it must be in order to continue to learn and grow and make music. Even if by withdrawing, by letting go, we continue. A. The primary reason why I wanted us to watch the film, The Little Girl Who Sold the Sun, I'm going to say it in English now, just because, is because of the final two words, we continue. We find ourselves in a moment of intensity, a moment of in which the ongoing crisis of racialization, or the ongoing crisis of identity as a strategy of containment, the ideas that the identities that have been forced upon us are modes that make us vulnerable to the violence of the state. We exist in this moment of intensity, and I think that Silly can become our moral and ethical guide. That she recognizes the fact that there is a kind of world that is against her fundamentally. We can call this the world of patriarchy. We can call this the world of ableism. We can call this the world of sexism, the world of misogynoir. That the kinds of experiences she had as a Black girl are because she was a Black girl paraplegic. That the boys used her disability in the service of trying to violate her. They tried to make what was vulnerable about her and use that vulnerability as a means to attack her, right? She recognized this and she still decided to sell newspapers. She still decided to engage in ethical and moral practices that would provide care for her grandmother, that would provide care for her friends, that would provide care for herself. That care for her included her giving her friends dresses, paying for music to follow her and her friends, and for sunglasses. In other words, care is not the antithesis of play. Care is not the antithesis of pleasure, but play and pleasure are parts of the ways that we actually practice care with one another. And so Silly provided pleasure. She provided play as a means to care for and with her friends. She provided shade for her grandmother in order to practice care for her grandmother. She did these things, it seems to me, out of a reserve that she had within her, the reserve of joy, in which she had things that she wanted to share with others. And when she sells the 13 newspapers, it just gives her a material condition under which she can practice the kind of care she was already desiring to practice, and thus the kind of care she was already practicing with the folks. The money doesn't become then the occasion where care is enacted. The money just becomes an occasion for her to enact the kind of care she was already practicing, because the care that she's practicing is about the kind of person that she is. Again, the question, who do you want to be? What kind of person do you want to be? What is your moral and your ethical sort of guidepost that with which you move through the world? And so Silly, it seems to me, is this beautiful person that allows us to really think deeply about what it means to practice care with one another. When I first saw the film, what is true about this from the Lonely Letters is I'd had a dream. The dream was about carrying someone who I was interested in over the threshold of a door. And I remember having this dream because I woke up in 2010. And I remember it clearly. I woke up and I wrote a letter, Dear Moth. And it was about carrying this person, Moth, over a threshold. And I thought the letter was good enough. I mean, it wasn't a project at the point. It was just something that I was trying to think about. What does it mean to carry and be carried by? What does it mean to hold and be held by? And so really, really thinking deeply about the concept of carrying, being the concept of holding, the concept of being tender with someone and having someone be tender with you. That's what the letter was about. The next day, I'm a grad student at this point. The next day, I went to class, a class that I was not in but was auditing that my mentor was teaching. And in this class session, this mentor played the movie, The Little Girl Who Sewed the Sun. And it rocked me to my core because what happened at the end of the film with her friend picking, well, it happens throughout the film actually, where he picks her up and Baba Sek, he picks her up, he carries her several times in the film, he puts her on his back. He practices this deep care with her as a practice of friendship through carrying her. And so my mind was really, really, my mind, my imagination, everything was really, really unsettled in the best kind of way, but also like kind of like scared, like what kind of mystical thing is happening where I had a dream, and then the thing that I dreamed about and wrote about the night before is the thing that happens in this film. Still can't explain it other than it being a mystical encounter. Or what I would say is that time isn't linear, that time moves in weird, strange ways that are not about sort of progressive movement, but time moves in cycles. And so some things can be made available to us in the sensual domain in ways that we don't have ways to sort of make sense of until things come to fruition. This also happened to me the weekend before my paternal grandmother died. That Saturday, I had a dream about a family member dying. I woke up crying very hard. And I couldn't remember or think about or cognize who the family member was, but I had this deep sense of longing for someone who died. 2 days later, my parents call me and say, your grandmother, my paternal grandmother, died earlier that morning. Again, dreams making available certain kinds of concepts, ideas, modes of connection, ideologies. That dream too was startling to me, because what it did, it made me not prepared, but it did give me a sense perception for the fact that loss was going to happen. This is why I love dreams. I was not close at all to my paternal grandmother. It's not that we talked all the time. It's not that we had this close relationship where we were always sort of in communication. It was that the dream made available some kind of knowledge. And because I really don't know what dreams are, and because it constantly happens to me, I really try to pay attention to what it is that my dreams are presenting. And so the day before I watched this film, The Little Girl Who Sold the Sun, that is really predicated upon care work, that's predicated upon being tender, that's predicated upon carrying one another. I had this dream about carrying somebody, and then I wrote a letter about carrying someone. I talk about what that letter is in the Lonely Letters. It's a letter about Superman, or it's a dream about Superman's, which I've been having since I was a child. The reason beyond sort of the care that Silly practices, the reason why I wanted us to watch the film is because of the two words with which she ends. We continue. It is a command, it is a desire, and it is the practice of joy. We continue. That we continue names the fact that you are in the middle of something, that you have a plan, that you have desire, and that the thing that happens, the thing that interrupts you, the thing that comes to be an obstacle is not enough of a force to take you off of your path, to make you aver from the journey that you were on. Silly recognized that she wanted to do something. She wanted to practice care for her grandmother. She wanted to practice care for her friends. And she recognizes that what these boys are trying to do is to interrupt her capacity for practicing care with her grandmother and her friends and for herself. And so they use the various tools at their disposal in order to interrupt her capacity for practicing care. When her friend says, well, what do we do now that you don't have your crutches? What do we do now that they have stolen your newspapers? We continue. It doesn't mean that what happened isn't heinous. It doesn't mean that what happened isn't terrible. It just means that I have to stay on the path that I want to stay on. I want to be the kind of person that I'm supposed to be, right? This is the question that Suge sort of poses. I keep going back to The Color Purple, but this is a question that Suge poses to Celie, right? When Celie is talking about wanting to kill Mr., Suge is like, well, but Nettie is waiting for the person that she knows, and the person that she knows is not a person who would engage in this kind of violence. It doesn't make the violence that Albert is doing to you right. It doesn't justify the violence, but if you transform who you are, because if you are fully in reaction to, and your violent behavior is a full reaction to the violence that has happened to you, then you allow for that violence to transform you fundamentally from the path that you were on, from the journey that you were on, from the kind of moral and ethical person and practice that you were engaging. What Suge said ostensibly is the same thing that Silly said. We have to continue. And so, one of the things I've been wanting us to really think deeply about is, what are the kinds of people that we are? Who are we? Who do we think we are? What is the work that we have been called to do? What is the kind of moral and ethical sort of center that is going to guide you in your principles and your relationship to other people and to the earth? If you have made a commitment to be a certain kind of person in the world that does justice, then how are you doing it now is the question. How are you carrying in the way that Silly's friend carries her? How are you carrying the content of your moral and ethical practice? I did a podcast a couple of days ago, and I said I'm really tired of identity as like a thing that we own, and I'm more interested in practice. And so I was saying to one friend that I'm tired of like identifying as a progressive. I'm more interested in how people practice progressive politics, because that's more important. Sometimes we use the identity, well, I'm a progressive. We use that identity then to disallow any kind of critique of our actions or behaviors because we say, well, my identity is as this thing, and so I am protected from any mode of critique. I'm not interested in identity. I'm interested in what are you doing? That's it. Like, who are you being? Who are you becoming? What is the relationship of the work that you are doing? And how is that producing more justice and joy in the world? And so, silly is being carried becomes a way for us to think about the necessity of carrying as a practice the kind of moral and ethical um, um, things that we want to do in the world, the kinds of force that we want to be for other people and for ourselves. And so we have to ask ourselves, what is the thing that I'm carrying? And recognize what are the things that are here to interrupt my capacity to carry those things. Toni Morrison is famous for saying that white supremacy is a distraction for Black folks. That what white supremacy wants us to do is not to do our work, the work of the artist, the work of the preacher, the work of the teacher, the work of the parent. And what white supremacy is constantly trying to do is interrupt our capacity for doing our own work. It's trying to distract us from the livingness of Blackness. It's trying to get in the way, right? It's trying to, and while it's trying to get in the way, it's also then trying to change the content of the thing that we carry. It's trying to get us to change the content of the thing that we carry, because the thing that we carry is the thing that has the capacity to radically transform our lives and the lives of the white supremacist world as well, right? And so we cannot be distracted. Silly recognizes that what these boys are trying to do is distract her from practicing care as a practice. From practicing care as a practice. I know that sounds circular. They're trying to get in the way of her doing nice things for other people by selling newspapers. But it's more than just being nice, right? She's actually practicing this kind of deep care for one another. She is also then modeling other ways that the boys could be too, right? That her and her relationship with her friend Babu Sek is also a model for a different kind of mode of relationality that is not predicated upon competition and the elimination of competition, but it's like, well, if I care about you and I'm going to sell a newspaper and you're going to sell a newspaper, I'm still going to support you. Because what is more urgent and what is more necessary is my practice of care as opposed to my practice of the political economy, which is predicated, at least in the global, in this global market under which we live of racial capitalism, it is predicated upon the refusal of care or the gendering of care, such that the only ways that you can practice care is through the kind of refusal to actually compensate properly for care work. There's a lot of layers there. But what Silly presents to us as a way to think about care is the grounding wire of our relationship. Her and her relationship with Babu Sek is about the practice of care. And the end, we continue. We do not allow for misery. My favorite sermonizer, Lanice Pinkard, says, we don't allow misery to have the last word. We don't allow misery to have the final say. We despair, but we do not stop at despair, right? That we continue. Well, to say I continue, to say we continue means that you are already doing something in which you would need to continue. Silly was doing something that she wanted to continue, care. So the question that I have for you, and the question that I pose to myself too, is what is it that I think that I'm doing? What is it that you think that you're doing? And are these things that we need to continue? I fundamentally believe in a different kind of world. We watched the film of Grace Lee Boggs for last week. Another world is possible. Another world is needed. Another world is here. I believe fully in the transformative capacity of every individual. As long as you breathe, I believe in your capacity for change in the direction of joy and justice. I believe it. I'm an abolitionist, prison abolitionist, and the abolitionist in general. I believe that transformation is possible, and that transformation can always be in the service of justice and joy. I believe in the beauty of the everyday. I believe every person is beautiful, not as the antithesis of the thing that we call the ugly, but beauty as its own thing. The fact of your breath, the fact that you are here, the fact of your flesh is the fact of your beauty. How can we carry that, right? How can we carry the fact that transformation is possible? How can we carry the fact that we are all beautiful, right? I believe fully in our capacity for transformation. I believe fully in our capacity for beauty. And I believe that what we have to do is constantly confront a world that tells us that we can't be otherwise than this. And so Silly and the little girl who sold the sun becomes a moral and ethical guide for us. She becomes a moral and ethical sort of model for us, and her relationship with her grandmother and with her friends and with Babu Sek are models for us for different kinds of moral and ethical ways that we can exist in the world. What if we allowed for care to be the thing that we said, more than anything else, I want to care for you? It sounds perhaps simple, but simple doesn't mean that it's not profound. Simple doesn't mean that it's not difficult to do. It means that, but it does mean that you have to make a commitment to it, regardless of if we think of it as simple or not. I don't think of care as simple at all. To say we continue is to say that there is a thing that I was already doing. I had a plan. And how can I remain in the direction of the plan? And for me, the direction of the plan that I have is a more just, a more equitable, a more loving, a more kind, a more imaginative world where everyone is fed. And so I'm going to continue on the path with other people. We it can't just be me. I'm going to continue on the path with others as a social practice, the direction of justice, joy, love, pleasure, kindness. That's what I'm going to do with other folks. We have to make, again, revolution irresistible. We have to make the capacity for imagining otherwise modes of possibility, otherwise worlds, alternatives to the normative. We have to make the imagination for those things irresistible. And so Silly and the film, The Little Girl Who Sold the Sun, can be a guide for us to think about what does it mean to stay on the path even when you face obstacles, even when you face violence. Can you remain? And we learn something about your character when you remain on the path. Doesn't mean remaining on the path is easy. Let me say that again. It's not easy. But if you have conviction, if you are convicted that the path on which you are sort of traveling, the journey that you are on, is the journey towards justice and joy, we stay on it. And so I want to encourage you. I think this is the last video I'm doing for the semester. I want to encourage you to figure out what is the path that I'm on, and then figure out if that's the path that you want to be on, and then figure out the modes and the strategies that you can utilize in order to remain on that path, because the obstacles will come. They will certainly show themselves. But I think we can remain committed. And so for me, trying to figure out with you all how we can remain committed, how we can continue, is the thing that I care most about. And I think it's what's urgent, and I think it's what's necessary, and I think it's what we are being called upon in this critical moments of intensity to really sit with, think about, and imagine together with each other how we can practice more justice and joy with one another. That's all I have to say, other than we continue. Thank you for joining me.